Hi, and thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sealed for Good. It's a cracker today. We talk about the importance of surface preparation. This one is very, very dear to me, and I talk about it a lot when I do talks to applicators and in trainings, and our staff continue to do this, and it's in all our data sheets. Yet it amazes me how many times we still see issues out in the marketplace where applicators get it wrong. And I'm not sure why that is. When we do training, we say there's three really important things you must know before you start applying any product. Surface preparation, surface preparation, surface preparation. It is the key. Reinforced time and time again, yet so often we see jobs when they fail, and I'm not talking about specific products, it could be across the market. And I've been out to many projects at times over the years, and I've seen opposition product being used there, and it'd be a great opportunity for me to bag the opposition, but I don't, because the product is of good quality, but the problem is the way the surface has been prepared before the application. And this is not just for remedial works, this is also for new jobs. And we talk about simple things like concrete. Here's one here where there's a cementitious membrane that's been applied down on a concrete surface, and all the latents from the concrete is still there, and the areas, the material that's actually being pulled off the wall is thicker than the membrane, and the membrane's been applied at the right film thickness. It's got the correct form, but you shouldn't be able to pull any surface, any membrane off a surface, or it come off and have that sort of material in your hands. It should bond very, very well, and so this comes down to how sometimes I see applicators run the gauntlet. They almost take the risk and fine line and go, oh, it looks right, and then they not 100% certain it is right. And then you can go and lay the membrane to the right film thickness, do everything right in terms of your bond breakers, film thickness, correct drying, and the after applications, and everything is compromised from that first decision when you start the project about surface prep. And so I talk about this so often, and I'm going to refer back to people that we deal with in the surface coatings industry, particularly the guys that do corrosion protection. Now, when you speak to those sorts of applicators in that trade, they understand that with metals and metallic surfaces, how important surface prep is. And they do have a lot of pre-testing in terms of the surface before they start putting a coating on there. If you talk to engineers and they specify certain products that go on things like bridge decks or metal bridges or areas where there's high corrosion activity, the surface prep is critical. And yet, we don't treat that with the same respect in the waterproofing market, and I get annoyed with it at times because I see such good work sometimes and then it all comes unstuck. So let's talk about concrete first. Concrete. Sometimes there's additives in the concrete, sometimes the way that the concrete cures, you've got a surface residue sitting on top. It might look sound and stable, but if I get a key or I get a trowel and I scratch into that surface and I can start to see that it's not solid and hard, then to me, obviously, that means I need to look at grinding that substrate and taking it back to a condition or a stability where it is sound, and it is sound and stable. I even see people when they're putting self-levelers on floors, and I'm sure many of the flooring guys watching this can testament to it, where flooring comes up, because what happens is when you put a new product on top, there's a curing phase. So if it's a cementitious membrane or even a water-based membrane or a solvent membrane or a 2-pack epoxy or a 2-pack urethane, there's a curing process. And what happens is it'll give a bit of stress on the substrate. Now if that's a real weak surface and it's not solid and sound, you'll get a separation, and then that's going to continue, and then it compromises everything else. So with concrete, make sure it's solid, sound and stable. This information that's on our data sheets and on many other data sheets is not there for just to take up space on a data sheet. It's there for a reason. Refer to it. And then you've got to put the correct primer down, which we've gone through before. So this is not about primers today, it's about the stage before you prime. So concrete's one. If I've got things like precast concrete, or concrete has been poured, particularly where you may have vertical surfaces and they've used form release agents on the formwork, or they've used things like diesel. Sometimes there's a separation layer. You need to it's things that are not visible to the eye, you need to check. So what we've said before about doing the water droplet tests, get a water misting bottle, mist some water on there, see if the absorption's happening. ensure that the surface is reacting like it should be. If you start to see that you're putting water on a concrete wall, mist water on there, and it's beading, then there's something on there. It could be a wax residue, it could be a diesel residue, it could be something else. Clean it. There are a number of degreasers out there. There are a lot of other good surface prep products. It might need a pressure clean, but don't just guess and think this will be okay and put my membrane on it, because you are going to be ultimately responsible once you start laying that product down. That is critical. Metallic surfaces, okay, galvanized iron, zingalume, aluminium. When they're aged, you're going to make sure obviously they're rust free, and if there is rust or corrosion, treat the rust, because rust is like concrete cancer. It'll continue underneath the coating. That's very, very important. The next piece though is if it's new metals that you're going over. Again, a lot of the new metals in the factories, when they come out, they have an oil release on them, and so it's important that you might think, oh, I can brush a primer on there and it's sticking at the moment, but is there an oil residue on there? So take precautions, use a degreaser. There are a number of tests you can run to see whether, if you get what I always tell applicators is if they get a substrate that's not where they're actually working on, and something like, there's a bit of sky on, but let's pretend it was a sheet of metal. I'll spray water on that, it's aged, and see how it reacts on that versus the new surface. It should react in the same way. If there's anything that's notably different, then one of those substrates is not prepared right. That's important. And so get that piece right. And that's the same with things like if we're going over timbers or cement sheet. Now, cement sheet, unless you've got contamination or things that have dropped on there, it should react as it's designed for. But again, just make sure. There may have been guys that have been walking out on a deck or a podium that have had all sorts of crap under their feet, and it might not be visible to the eye, and then you start rolling out primers and membranes and find that the membrane just can come up easily. Check the surface first. That extra 10 minutes to a half hour to an hour, if it needs, of checking the surface prep can save you a lot of money and time and your reputation. That is very, very important. Risk taking is not where it happens. There's two things I always see about good tradies out there: clean tools and clean surfaces. They get that piece right. If I walk on a site and I see the attention to detail that an applicator's gone to and getting his area right, making sure that it's cautioned off, there's no one walking in there, it's cleaned, it's vacuumed instead of just getting an old broom that's already got shit and dust in it. Clean that properly, then you know that you actually got someone who knows what they're doing, and it gives me a lot of confidence in training these people, certifying them, and also recommending them. They're the sorts of little 1%ers that give away that an applicator knows exactly what they're doing. It's so important. You know, we talk about surface dust. Guys say to me, oh, I don't want to prime because I'm just going to clean the surface down. You still, on some substrates, get surface dust, and a primer, after you've cleaned it, will lock that in. So just don't cut corners. It is so important on the surface prep. If you're on things like Dinsel, which we've spoken about before, it's a plastic type surface or a PVC. These sorts of surfaces need to be cleaned. Then you look at the OP primer on top. Same if you're going over, I see we've got our OP primer that's used particularly on tiled surfaces or glazed tiles. But if I'm going inside a shower alcove that's had people in there, I might have washed it down, cleaned it and dried it, but there's soap and scum residues on top of those tiles that have they been removed and cleaned properly before you go and put a primer like the OP down on top of it or an epoxy surface. These are the little hacks that you just need to understand, not take the risk. It's very, very important. Get the surface prep right, make that a real big one, and ensure that any of you guys that have got people in your workforce that you contribute to and get them to actually do the work for you. Sometimes I know applicator crews get some of the younger apprentices or other guys to clean the surface and prep it for the main guy to put the membrane down. Don't think that the guy who's just the labourer or the young lackey that's doing the surface prep is the one that he needs to understand what he's looking for and what he needs to make sure that can stand up to. So the guy that does come up with the membrane down, it's a surface that is in perfect condition, can handle it, and you rest assured that you sleep well at night knowing you got full adhesion. Really keen to hear more from you guys. If you've got any photos or stories or comments about this one, surface prep, no one's going to convince me about shortcuts in this area. It's the main one you've got to make sure of in waterproofing. Get it right and you'll seal it for good. I'll see you next time.